Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. Today's presentation will be an in-depth exploration of my personal response to racist gaslighting Freemasons about, quote-unquote, guarding the West Gate, which is like a snide remark and jab that these people like to throw at good men who choose to walk away when they saw through the veil, saw through the illusions and BS. And also, to quote Bruce Lee, I'm not here to live up to your expectations, nor you are here to live up to mine. You don't have to like me, you don't have to be my friend, and I reserve my rights as a free man under free speech. So I thank you, and this will be my final video until March 2026. This presentation is produced for free speech, commentary, education, and entertainment purposes only. It reflects personal experiences, opinions, interpretations, and publicly discussed historical material, and is not intended to defame any individual. All organizations referenced are discussed in the context of history, sociology, lived experience, and documented public discourse. Viewers are encouraged to think critically, research independently, and arrive at their own conclusions. Introduction. Why does this response exist? This presentation responds to repeated racist gaslighting, dismissal, and deflection encountered when raising legitimate concerns about Freemasonry, power structures, and lived experiences of discrimination within the institution. It documents a personal journey, structural critiques, and broader patterns that many former members quietly acknowledge but rarely articulate publicly due to social pressure, fear of ostracism, or reputational retaliation. A personal closing statement. This material represents a final chapter addressing Freemasonry. And by addressing Freemasonry in a final way, I'm talking about the Lodge and Grand Lodge Freemasonry, as I will continue to put out works and materials in the future. And again, my disclaimers are always there that it's not about to encourage you to join the Grand Lodge and Lodge Freemasonry, but take the spiritual teachings and apply them to your life. And Freemasonry is another Eastern order and mystic system that white supremacy has basically hijacked and satanically inverted it, just like they did with Christianity, where even Christianity, right, it comes from the East. Jesus was a brown man, and it's about loving each other and helping each other and not used for racism. So that's exactly what we're dealing with here. So basically, this whole presentation is marking a deliberate transition away from institutional critique toward spiritual independence, faith, and personal responsibility before God. The intention is not vengeance or hostility, but clarity, closure, and the liberation of self and others from systems that no longer align with truth, integrity, or lived reality. Joining Freemasonry, expectations versus reality. Freemasonry is presented publicly as brotherhood, charity, moral improvement, and unity across race and religion. These ideals are attractive and resonate deeply with sincere seekers. The lived experience often diverges sharply, revealing political hierarchies, favoritism, racial bias, and a transactional culture where loyalty is demanded but rarely reciprocated in times of need. The oaths, the words, and psychological binding. Initiatory oaths function not only as symbolic commitments, but as psychological and spiritual binding mechanisms reinforced through repetition, secrecy, and social reinforcement. Words shape identity and perception. Words are spells. When combined with ritual authority and group pressure, they can bind individuals to collective egregores that influence behavior, health, and decision-making, especially when it comes to yourself and your family. The concept of the egregore. An egregore refers to a collective psychic construct sustained by shared belief, ritual, and emotional investment. Whether viewed spiritually or psychologically, its effects are widely reported by former members. Many report declines in health, finances, family stability, and mental clarity while active, followed by noticeable improvement after honorable departure and spiritual disentanglement. Why leaving the right way matters. Resigning in good standing is essential to fully disengage from institutional and psychological control structures embedded in membership systems. Suspension or expulsion often intensifies stress, conflict, and reputational damage, reinforcing dependency narratives and fear-based compliance. So that's something my haters, they can't say that against me, that I was suspended or expelled. I resigned honorably in good standing, and I have my paperwork and demit clearances to prove it, right, from the countries and jurisdictions that I belonged in as a regular recognized Master Mason in good standing. So, yep, you gotta leave the right way, so that way you can keep their mouths shut. The correct demit process. Members must first resign from all appendant bodies before resigning from their Blue Lodge, as foundational membership governs all other affiliations. Failing to follow this sequence results in automatic suspension elsewhere, effectively trapping individuals in bureaucratic and reputational limbo. So you got to make sure that you resign from all of the other appendant bodies, or like the side orders or houses that they say in Prince Hall. You got to do that first before you resign from your craft lodge or your Blue Lodge. So you got to make sure you do it the right way. And the reason is because the egregore, or that force that drains you mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually, will stay with you if you don't leave the right way. So make sure you're honorable, your dues are paid, right? And get out the right way. And the suspension and expulsion makes it worse. So just do it honorably and get out the right way. Here's where it gets interesting. The cult-like administrative behavior, which I've experienced in all the times that I joined and resigned. When members express intent to leave, local lodge officers frequently become evasive, unresponsive, or obstructive, delaying paperwork and withholding demits. Escalation to district, Grand Lodge, or national offices is often required to compel compliance with bylaws guaranteeing honorable exit. And the reason is that why they all start acting like that is because when a member leaves, even in good standing, that hurts the egregore, the Masonic egregore. So that's basically a power source that's removing itself from the egregore, refusing to be drained any further. And that hurts that collective egregore, and that's why they all start acting weird and funny when you mention resigning and leaving. What I did in my scenarios is I went to the district deputy grand masters, or in England they call them the grand inspectors, right? For the other bodies, you always go to the head. If the locals are acting up and acting funny with you, then always go to the head. So for the Royal Arch, go to the Grand High Priest, right? For the Lodge, go to the District Deputy, etc., etc. And for the Scottish Rite, of course, go to the Supreme Council, Membership Services. The sad part is you're basically paying for brotherhood. Active members often experience intense social engagement, validation, and visibility, likes, messages, invitations, and public praise, right? They're liking all your stuff on social media. They're inviting you to different events and stuff, right? You feel happy and welcomed. But upon departure, this support system vanishes almost instantly, right? It's like they were never there, revealing a transactional dynamic where fraternity is contingent upon dues, attendance, and utility. So as long as you're a dues-paying member, right, the rights and privileges are there. And you feel like you got friends around you, but once you leave, that's truly not the case. You're better off paying that $100-something to AAA once a year, where at least they'll come and rescue you if your car breaks down somewhere, or give you a free tow, give you a hotel. With these guys, in a moment of need, they're never there to help you. So you're better off getting a AAA membership. Racism within Freemasonry. Despite universalist rhetoric, racism has historically and contemporarily existed within mainstream Freemasonry, particularly toward Black, Muslim, and non-European members, right? And the nerve of these people, just like how I mentioned earlier, Christianity being an Eastern faith and religion, which teaches everyone to love one another, yet it was satanically hijacked and inverted by white supremacy for colonialism and imperialism, same as towards Freemasonry or that spiritual system. Prince Hall Freemasonry itself emerged due to exclusion, segregation, and refusal of recognition by white Grand Lodges for generations. Gaslighting and denial. When racism is addressed, it is often dismissed as misunderstanding, individual behavior, or external to the institution, rather than systematic. This gaslighting invalidates lived experience and protects institutional ego, while silencing those who challenge the dominant narrative. Freemasonry and the KKK, right? Now, historically, documented overlaps existed between members of the Ku Klux Klan and Masonic lodges, particularly in early 20th century America. Even the KKK Quran, bastardized from the Quran, itself borrowed fraternal structures, rituals, titles, and secrecy models common to Masonic and quasi-Masonic organizations. So basically, the KKK was started by Southern racist Masons from the Southern, Masonic states and jurisdictions in America. And why, till this very day, it's been such an uphill battle for the mainstream and the Prince Hall to get each other recognized. And even when they do recognize each other, it takes years for them to finally be able to sit in a lodge together. Symbolism and who it serves. Symbols and rituals are not neutral. They communicate hierarchy, obedience, and worldview to those initiated into their framework. Understanding whom these ceremonies ultimately serve often leads sincere seekers to disengage when alignment with conscience breaks. Inner circles and mushroom management. Like many hierarchical societies, Freemasonry operates with inner circles that control resources, advancement, and recognition. Lower ranks are frequently kept uninformed, fed selective narratives, and expected to sustain the system financially without transparency. Politics over merit. Advancement often depends more on allegiance, networking, and silence than on moral character or spiritual development. Honorary titles and high degrees are frequently awarded through politics rather than merit, eroding credibility and trust. It's like many of the people that I've seen who got the 33rd and things like that, or were involved in other stations and scenarios. They were not good people, right? And I think this fraternal structure models mostly after how the intelligence agencies operate, where they look for the scumbags and the psychopaths, and then they get, invited into the inner circles, into the invitational only appendant bodies, and then you see the same familiar faces everywhere. So that's basically what this is. Spiritual redundancy. The moral teachings of Freemasonry mirror principles already found in Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and ancient philosophies, which I've covered in this channel since 2019. No oath-bound institution is required to be charitable, upright, God-conscious, or ethical. These values predate Freemasonry itself. So it's not giving you something special or exclusive, right? You can be upright, believe in God, be charitable, help yourself and help your fellow man without being a part of any institution like this. Health, wealth, and recovery. Multiple departures. Now I'm talking about myself here, right? Because I've joined and resigned Masonry in more than one country and jurisdiction multiple times. So I was like somebody giving an abusive ex the benefit of the doubt, right? That they'll be okay, yeah, they'll be all right. But then they end up doing the same thing over and over again. So, and now with the Egregore here, you gotta listen to this, where multiple departures correlated with immediate improvements in health, finances, sleep, and mental clarity. Spiritual work, prayer, and conscious separation were necessary to fully recover from lingering psychological and energetic effects. So, Freemasonry today as an institution is basically infiltrated and compromised, where many people who belong to other orders and groups, right, have allegiance to each other beyond Freemasonry. And their energetic egregores and the stuff that they're involved in, the magic and whatever else that they're dealing with, it affects the rest of the members inside the lodge, right? So it's not about, you're not dealing with godly people all the time. So you got to keep that in mind. The decline of institutional Freemasonry. Membership decline, lodge closures, and amalgamations reflect broader disillusionment, especially among younger generations, Generation Z, Alpha, and beyond. The modern men seek transparency, authenticity, and reciprocity, values incompatible with outdated secrecy and hierarchy and racist systems. What I see happening as we head into the late 2020s is that in mid 2030s, Freemasonry, like that, the lodge and the Grand Lodge system will most likely dissolve by then. And especially with AI and all the stuff changing everything as we know it, everything is going to kind of return to the pre-1717, where Masonry was independent. And the future points towards independent study, decentralized lodges, and personal spiritual journeys outside Grand Lodge control. It's like what I'm doing now with my work, right? I'm not under the authority or control of any lodge or Grand Lodge, but that doesn't mean that I stopped doing what I was doing, right? I just have full freedom, right, to not be retaliated against because someone doesn't like what I'm doing. So knowledge is now accessible without permission, gatekeepers, or institutional approval. Trust in God, not institutions. True initiation occurs in the heart and conscience, not in closed rooms or scripted ceremonies. Where were you first made a Mason? In your heart. And that's something that no one can ever take away from you. No organization should require silence in the face of injustice, racism, or hypocrisy. Why does this response exist at all? This response exists because repeated attempts to raise concerns internally were met with gaslighting, minimization, racial deflection, and passive-aggressive institutional discipline, rather than sincere self-reflection. When an organization claims moral superiority, yet reacts defensively to critique, it reveals insecurity rather than strength. This presentation is not fueled by bitterness, but by pattern recognition. When enough people share similar experiences across jurisdictions, countries, and decades, the issue is no longer individual misunderstanding. It is a structural dysfunction protected by ritualized silence. The illusion of brotherhood. Freemasonry markets itself as a sacred brotherhood, a family bound by shared values and mutual support. In practice, this brotherhood often functions conditionally, activated only when dues are paid, meetings are attended, and conformity is maintained. True brotherhood does not evaporate when a man steps away for health, finances, family crisis, or conscience. Yet countless former members, including myself, report that the moment participation stops, communication ends, concerns vanish, and relationships dissolve, exposing a transactional rather than fraternal bond. So it's basically you're just paying for friends, and the moment you step away, all of the stuff disappears in person, on social media, like they were never there. And even when you are there, right, when you're just a member in good standing, rarely you'll get some help. Like if you need assistance of any kind, hey, I'm looking for a job, I need some help, I need some guidance, or I need help with a lawyer, etc., etc. So they don't help you, and they don't really give a damn unless you got to pay dues. That's why I said you're better off getting a AAA membership. At least when your car breaks down, they'll come and help tow your car, get you a hotel, right? Get you some food, etc. So just get the AAA membership. So this is my response to all these people. Oh, we got to guard the West Gate. We got to guard the West Gate. These people are just projecting, It's the same scumbags who have ruined the fraternity and brotherhood and have caused good men to walk away. You are basically paying for friends, man. One of the most uncomfortable realizations for many members is the recognition that social engagement within the lodge is artificially sustained through financial participation. Likes on social media, the messages, the invitations, the praise and visibility flow generously while dues are current and you're a member and labor is being extracted. Once a member demits, even honorably, this social currency disappears almost overnight. This reveals an economy of attention and validation where friendship is conditional upon usefulness, compliance, and continued funding of the institution. And also, from the occult perspective, once a member leaves, it hurts the egregore, and that's why they all start acting weird and funny when you do so. Smug gatekeepers of quote-unquote secret knowledge. Masonic knowledge gatekeepers often posture as custodians of ancient wisdom while offering little beyond recycled moral platitudes available freely in religion, philosophy, and psychology. This posture breeds smugness, ego inflation, and intellectual laziness. When questioned deeply, many so-called experts retreat behind secrecy rather than substance. This arrogance, combined with a refusal to acknowledge external sources, was a primary catalyst for creating an independent platform to expose redundancy, hypocrisy, and intellectual stagnation. And that's why I made my YouTube channel and did what I did with my lectures, my books, since 2019, even before all this AI stuff. I've been doing it for a while. And the stuff that I put out there in terms of the subjects and the lectures and presentations, the Masonic lodges will never ever cover this information. You could join a Masonic lodge, join all of the esoteric orders and independent bodies, and you could be with them for like 100 years and still not get all the stuff and knowledge and gems that I have provided to you since 2019, and all for free, right? Without any Cash App, membership, Patreon, any donations, nothing, right? Because knowledge should be made freely for all humanity, and take the lessons and apply them to your life. And you have all of these so-called experts, and they're all gatekeepers. They only give credit to European sources, while these teachings come from the East, and we're in Eastern systems. So that's where I had to come in. And again, you can join all of the lodges and bodies, and they will never ever cover the information that I have covered on this channel since 2019. Why the YouTube channel was necessary. This channel was created because institutional Freemasonry consistently refused to address Islam, African origins of esoteric knowledge, or non-Western metaphysics with intellectual honesty. Bias, ignorance, and Eurocentric arrogance dominated the discourse, where they only give credit to the Greeks and Romans. Rather than elevate understanding, lodge culture punished deviation from approved narratives. Independent publishing became the only viable path to truth sharing outside institutional censorship. So even if you look at their speaking panels or their Masonic cons or whatever con that they're doing, right? No pun intended. You see basically that it's the same faces. They're talking about the same subjects. You don't see any diversity in terms of the racial or subjects. So that's why I came into the picture with my own independent publishing in terms of my books, my lectures, and my YouTube channel. Oaths, rituals, and psychological control. Ritual oaths function not merely as symbolic gestures, but as psychological anchors reinforcing loyalty through fear, obligation, and internalized surveillance. Words repeated under ritual authority shape identity and suppress dissent. This mechanism explains why many members feel anxiety, guilt, or fear when contemplating departure, even when no rational harm exists. Control persists long after belief fades, so it's all like an internalized surveillance type of situation. The Egregore simply explained, whether interpreted spiritually or psychologically, an egregore represents the collective emotional and mental energy of a group, sustained through ritual, repetition, and belief. Participation feeds it, and the withdrawal weakens its influence. And that's why they all start acting weird and funny when someone demits. Many former members independently report improved health, finances, sleep, and mental clarity after honorable disengagement, suggesting real psychosomatic and social effects tied to prolonged participation. Racism beneath universalist language. Despite proclamations of equality, Freemasonry has historically excluded, segregated, or marginalized Black, Muslim, and non European men. Prince Hall Freemasonry itself exists because mainstream lodges refused recognition for generations till this very day. And the modern racism persists through the microaggressions, the online racist behavior, selective enforcement of rules, and cultural dominance disguised as tradition. Gaslighting as an institutional defense mechanism. When racism is raised, the default response is denial. That's not Masonry. You misunderstood. Or that's just one bad apple. Or they say you got to separate the institution from the individual. This deflection protects institutional ego while invalidating lived experience. Gaslighting ensures the complaining people, right, and the ones making the complaints appear unstable while the system remains unexamined. Inner circles and the mushroom system. Like all the hierarchical institutions, Freemasonry concentrates power in inner circles. Lower ranks are deliberately kept uninformed while expected to fund operations and uphold legitimacy. This fed and kept in the dark dynamic breeds resentment once awareness emerges. So basically, there's an inner temple and an outer temple. So those in the outer temple, it doesn't matter. They could be master masons, past masters in good standing, right? But there are certain doors of the fraternity where they are closed, whether it's the higher degrees or the invitational only bodies, right? There's like a level that there are levels to it, right? Where you see the same familiar faces everywhere, and they're all like, basically it's a good old boys network, and they're all helping each other out. And many of them, their allegiances lie beyond Freemasonry. I think they use Freemasonry as a cover and a shield, right? It's like what George Washington said about Freemasonry being infiltrated and compromised. He was right. There is truth to that. Politics over principle. Advancement frequently depends more on allegiance, silence, and networking than on moral character or spiritual insight. Titles and honors become political currency. This reality corrodes trust and exposes the gap between professed ideals and operational behavior. Again, we look at the KKK, fraternalism in America, and the historical overlap. Historical records confirm overlaps between early 20th century Masonic membership and the Ku Klux Klan leadership. The KKK adopted fraternal rituals, secrecy, titles, and hierarchical structures similar to Masonic systems. This does not indict every Mason, but it exposes how fraternal networks and frameworks can be weaponized for exclusionary ideologies. And we see that whether it's the southern states having difficulty to this very day recognizing their black brothers, or even when they do recognize them, it takes years for them to be able to sit in lodges together, like Florida, for example. And just in general, how basically a beautiful mystic system of the East, like Christianity, was hijacked and satanically inverted by white supremacy. Spiritual redundancy and diminishing returns. Everything moral Freemasonry teaches, charity, integrity, God consciousness, is already present in older traditions without secrecy or dues. As awareness grows, men increasingly ask, especially the current generation of Generation Z and Alpha and beyond, what exactly am I gaining here that I cannot gain elsewhere freely? So, they don't got time for that BS. And that's why in the mid-2030s, the pre-1717 model will emerge again. Why the younger generation walk away? Younger men reject hierarchy without transparency, loyalty without reciprocity, and tradition without integrity. They will not tolerate racism, hypocrisy, or performative morality dressed as enlightenment. So before any of them make that comment about, oh, we got to guard the West Gate, the way Generation Z and Alpha is, they're going to shove that West Gate up your ass. Decline of the Grand Lodge system. Membership decline, lodge closures, and forced amalgamations reflect systematic failure rather than coincidence. Institutions that refuse to evolve ethically will collapse under their own contradictions. Return to the independent paths. The future lies in independent study, decentralized communities, and direct accountability to God rather than bureaucratic authority. Knowledge no longer requires permission. Trust God, not institutions. True initiation occurs in the heart, not behind closed doors. You're made a Mason first in your heart. No oath should silence conscience. Trust God and do not fear any danger. The first lesson that you receive as an entered apprentice. My final message is that this presentation is closure, not obsession. A chapter closed with clarity. Those who recognize these truths are encouraged to choose integrity over belonging. Here are some references and contexts that I would recommend that you look up at your own leisure and convenience. Thank you for watching. If any questions or comments, please email me at salmansheikh911@gmail.com. And of course, all of my videos and my channel is under the copyright laws of fair use for the purpose of free speech, nonprofit, education, and entertainment and information purposes. Thank you. All rights reserved.